The Draken Dominion loomed over the galaxy, like a shadow, an empire whose reach extended across thousands of worlds. Its citizens were bred for conquest, its technology unmatched, and its warriors unrelenting. At the heart of this colossal force sat Emperor Zorvokthar, a towering figure of scaled obsidian flesh, his presence alone commanding fear and reverence. Seated in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals, Zorvok listened with cold intensity as the latest report from the galactic frontier was delivered. "Our scouts have confirmed it," said General Vero Zen, his voice a low rumble. "The humans occupy a rich sector near the Sol system. Their resources are abundant, their defenses." He paused, curling his lip. Primitive, the Emperor's golden eyes flickered with faint amusement. Another insignificant species, clinging to a single star. What makes these humans worthy of our attention? Vero straightened, his armor clinking softly. "Their insolence, my lord." A Draken scout ship approached their planet unarmed to observe their capabilities. They destroyed it without warning. The room fell silent. The assembled council exchanged glances, some amused, others incredulous. The idea of such a backward species openly defying the Draken Dominion was laughable, and yet it had happened. Zorvok leaned forward, his claws tapping rhythmically on the armrest of his throne. "Arrogance," he said softly, his voice as cold as the void. "Perhaps they believe themselves clever. What do we know of them?" Vero gestured, and a holographic display lit up the chamber. A projection of Earth rotated in the air, surrounded by streams of data. "They are divided into nations, often in conflict with one another. Their technology is crude by our standards. Nuclear weapons, orbital satellites, primitive spacecraft. They have not yet colonized beyond their own moon. However," he added, his voice hardening, "their history is a tapestry of relentless warfare. They've survived not through unity, but through their willingness to destroy one another." Zorvok's claws stilled. "They fight themselves to survive?" "Precisely, my lord. Their wars are small by our standards, but frequent and savage. It is their nature." The Emperor rose, his shadow stretching across the room. "Nature or not, their defiance cannot go unanswered. Assemble a delegation. Offer them the chance to submit. Unconditionally." Vero smirked, his serrated teeth glinting. "And when they refuse?" Zorvok's voice carried the weight of inevitability. "We will remind them of their place." Far above Earth, the Draken delegation arrived in an enormous battleship, its sleek, predatory design blotting out the stars. In the ship's central chamber, Vero Zen stood before a holographic display of Earth's surface. His imposing frame dwarfed the human envoys standing opposite him. Commander Ethan Cole, a man of sharp features and steely resolve, met Vero's gaze without flinching. "This is your only warning," Vero declared, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "The Draken Dominion offers you mercy. Submit now, and your people will be spared. Resist, and we will annihilate you." Ethan didn't move, his expression unreadable. He had prepared for this moment, knowing that Earth's very survival depended on his response. "You assume we'll surrender because you've seen what we have and think it's not enough. But you've seen only the surface of who we are." Vero's eyes narrowed. "I've seen enough to know you cannot hope to match us. Your weapons are toys. Your ships are fragile. Even your unity is a facade." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "What makes you think you have anything to offer that could stop us?" Ethan's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "You've studied our wars, our conflicts. Did you ever stop to wonder how we're still here?" Vero's confidence wavered for a split second. It was an almost imperceptible crack, but Ethan caught it. "You call us primitive, but every inch of this world has been fought over, bled for, and rebuilt. We've faced extinction more times than I care to count. Plagues, famines, invaders, even ourselves. And yet, we're still here." The Draken general straightened, his features hardening into a mask of disdain. "Your defiance is meaningless. In one cycle, our fleet will arrive. Whatever fragile hope you cling to will burn. Ethan met his gaze unflinching. We've heard that before. As the humans were escorted back to their shuttle, Vero turned to one of his subordinates. Monitor their preparations. Let them think they have a chance. The Draken officer saluted. As you command, General. Vero gazed at the receding view of Earth on the holographic display, his mind already calculating the conquest to come. These humans intrigued him, a fleeting curiosity, nothing more. Soon, they would be another footnote in the Dominion's endless march across the galaxy. But in the back of his mind, Ethan's words lingered like a shadow, whispering of something he couldn't yet understand. The meeting room deep within Earth's primary defense headquarters was packed with tension, the air thick with the weight of impossible odds. Commander Ethan Cole stood at the center of the circular table, his sharp gaze moving over the faces of the world's military leaders, scientists, and strategists. The grim expressions told him everything he needed to know. No one here believed victory was possible. But then, belief wasn't why they were here. Survival demanded action, not faith. Ethan pressed a button on the control panel, and the hologram of the Draken fleet shimmered into view above the table. Massive warships, each bristling with weapons and armor, formed an armada that seemed almost mythical in scale. The room darkened as the simulation projected a hypothetical battle scenario, showing Earth's meager forces being obliterated in minutes. "This is what we're up against," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the grim display. "The Drekins have numbers, firepower, and experience in conquest. By any traditional measure, we can't win. But traditional measures aren't going to decide this war." A murmur rippled through the room. General Marcus Hayes, a grizzled veteran whose reputation for brutal honesty was as legendary as his battlefield acumen, leaned forward. "So, what's the plan, Commander? Throw rocks at their ships and hope they trip over them." A faint smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "In a way, yes. But our rocks will be psychological." He turned off the hologram and stepped closer to the table. "The Drekins think they've already won. They believe us weak because we don't have their technology or their empire. What they don't understand, what they can't understand, is what it's taken for humanity to survive." Hayes frowned. "Survive what? Each other?" "Exactly," Ethan replied. "We've been at war with ourselves since the dawn of civilization. They see that as a weakness. I see it as our greatest strength." Dr. Adrian Voss, a leading historian specializing in human warfare, cleared his throat. "You're suggesting we show them our history?" "Not just show them," Ethan said. "Make them feel it. Every Draken soldier, every ship, every officer. They'll see what we've endured, what we've overcome, and what we're capable of. We're going to weaponize our history." The room fell silent. Even Hayes seemed taken aback by the audacity of the idea. Finally, General Li Wei, a quiet but shrewd strategist, spoke up. "How do you propose we do that?" Ethan tapped the control panel again, bringing up a blueprint of a network of satellites currently under rapid construction. "We're deploying a series of holographic projection systems capable of transmitting ultra-realistic simulations directly into their fleet. These won't be simple images or videos. They'll be fully immersive recreations of Earth's greatest battles." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You're going to scare off an empire with history lessons?" Ethan's tone hardened. "I'm going to remind them what war really means. They've never fought an enemy like us, one that spent millennia perfecting the art of survival through conflict. They've never faced a species that's turned war into a science and a madness." Voss leaned forward, his voice cautious but intrigued. "Which battles are you planning to use?" "Every one that matters," Ethan said. Thermopylae, where a few hundred held off thousands. The trenches of the First World War, where the ground itself became a graveyard. Stalingrad, where a city was reduced to ashes but refused to fall. We'll show them guerrilla warfare in Vietnam, the relentless naval combat of Midway, and the devastation of Hiroshima. They'll see the brutality, the ingenuity, and the unyielding spirit that has defined us. A younger officer at the back of the room spoke hesitantly. "What if they're not afraid? What if they see it and think we're just savages? Ethan's expression didn't waver. That's a risk. But if we do this right, they won't see savages. They'll see predators. They'll see a species that can turn its darkest instincts into its greatest weapon. And they'll think twice before stepping onto our battlefield. The room fell into a heavy silence as the enormity of the plan sank in. Finally, Hayes let out a low chuckle. Well, if nothing else, it's the craziest damn idea I've ever heard, which probably means it just might work. The next weeks were a frenzy of preparation. Factories that once churned out civilian goods now produced holographic projectors and advanced communication relays at a breakneck pace. Militaries across the globe worked in unison, training crews to deploy and operate the satellites. Historians and simulation experts collaborated to ensure every detail of the recreated battles was flawless. From the sound of swords clashing at Hastings to the deafening roar of tanks at Kursk, Ethan barely slept, his days consumed by overseeing the operation and refining the strategy. Yet, amid the chaos, he found a strange calm. This wasn't just a defense of Earth. It was a declaration of humanity's resilience, a testament to everything they had endured and everything they had become. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood united, not against each other, but against a common threat. The night before the Draken fleet's arrival, Ethan stood on the observation deck of the orbital command station. Below him, Earth glowed with the soft light of its cities, a fragile jewel in the vastness of space. Beside him, General Hayes joined him, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. "Hell of a view," Hayes said, handing Ethan a cup. Ethan nodded, taking a sip. "Hard to believe that's what we're fighting for. All that chaos, all that beauty." Hayes grunted. "You think this'll work?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched as a squadron of Earth's hastily constructed defense ships moved into position, their silhouettes dwarfed by the planet below. Finally, he said, "I think we've spent our entire existence preparing for this fight. The Drekins think they're invincible, but they don't understand us. Not yet." Hayes chuckled a low, gravelly sound. "You're a stubborn bastard, Cole. I'll give you that." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let's hope that stubbornness runs in our species." As the command station buzzed with final preparations, the first reports came in. The Draken fleet had entered the system. Ethan straightened, his eyes hardening. The time for planning was over. Now, it was time to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The Draken fleet arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave, their warships blotting out the stars as they emerged from hyperspace above Earth. Each vessel gleamed like a blade, its hull alive with shimmering energy fields. On board the command ship Vorith, General Vero then stood at the helm, his golden eyes fixed on the blue-green planet below. "This is the best they can muster?" Vero's voice dripped with disdain as he observed the human defensive line. A patchwork fleet of ships orbited Earth, a motley array of retrofitted space shuttles, hastily constructed carriers, and aging satellites. To a Draken, it looked like the final act of a desperate species. A subordinate officer stepped forward, saluting sharply. "General, the humans are holding their position. No signs of retreat or surrender." Vero smirked, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light of the command deck. "Foolish to the end. Prepare the fleet. We will strike swiftly and end this farce before their sun sets." On board the human command station, Commander Ethan Cole stood amidst a sea of activity. Technicians called out status updates, holograms flickered with tactical overlays, and the hum of anticipation buzzed in the air. Ethan's focus never left the main display, a vast, glowing map of the incoming Draken fleet. "Are the satellites in position?" Ethan asked, his voice calm despite the storm gathering in his chest. "Yes, sir," replied Lieutenant Daniels, one of his key officers. "All units are ready to broadcast on your command." Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening. "Hold steady. No one fires until I give the order." The command center quieted, the weight of the moment settling over the room. Outside, Earth's makeshift fleet maintained its position, seemingly frozen in the face of the approaching Draken armada. Back on the Vorith, Vero grew impatient. "They don't even have the decency to fight back," he muttered. "Open a channel. I want them to hear their doom." Moments later, Ethan's face appeared on a holographic display before the Draken warlord. His expression was unreadable, his tone devoid of fear. "General Zen, nice of you to show up." Vero sneered. "You've wasted your opportunity to surrender. Now, you'll die with the rest of your kind." Ethan's gaze hardened. "You assume this is going to be easy. But before you make a mistake you can't take back, let me show you something." He gestured off-screen. "You came here thinking you'd find prey. Let me introduce you to the predators." The connection cut abruptly, and in its place, the Draken ship's communication systems were flooded with a cascade of visuals. At first, the images were chaotic. Shouts, explosions, the clash of steel. Then the horror took shape. The Battle of Thermopylae unfolded in vivid detail. Draken soldiers watching as outnumbered Spartans stood against an overwhelming force. They felt the weight of shields locking together, the defiant roars of men who refused to yield. The simulation shifted, plunging the Drekins into the suffocating mud and blood of the Somme. Trenches stretched endlessly, filled with the cries of wounded soldiers and the deafening booms of artillery. Gas seeped through the air, choking those too slow to don masks. Stalingrad followed, a frozen hellscape where hunger and desperation drove men to fight with their bare hands. Tanks burned. Snipers lurked in shadows, and the sea itself became a weapon. Each battle was more brutal than the last, a relentless barrage of humanity's capacity for destruction and resilience. The Draken soldiers couldn't look away, their senses overwhelmed by the raw emotion and ferocity radiating from the simulations. It was not just history. It was war distilled to its purest, most terrifying form. On the Vorith, Vero staggered back, his claws gripping the edge of his command console. What is this?" An officer turned to him, her face pale despite her scaled skin. "General, these aren't just images. They're memories. It's as if we're living them." Vero bared his teeth, forcing himself to focus. "They think they can frighten us with primitive savagery. Ridiculous." Yet even as he spoke, he felt the gnawing unease creeping through his mind. The humans weren't just showing violence. They were showing survival at any cost. Back on Earth's command station, Ethan monitored the satellite feeds. Reports from intelligence teams poured in, confirming signs of disarray among the Draken fleet. "They're reacting," Daniel said, barely containing his excitement. "Their formations are breaking." "Not enough," Ethan said quietly. "We need to push harder." He keyed the control panel, activating the final phase of the broadcast. The projection shifted again, this time focusing on Hiroshima. The blinding flash of the atomic bomb filled the Draken screens, followed by the haunting silence of its aftermath. The devastation was absolute. An entire city vaporized in an instant. For a species that had never witnessed such destruction, the sight was incomprehensible. On the Vorith, Vero shouted, "End this! Shut down their transmissions." "We're trying, General, but their systems are adaptive. We can't block them." Vero's claws tore into the console as he snarled. "Then launch the attack. Wipe them out." An officer hesitated. "Sir, some of our troops are refusing to engage." "They say," she faltered, her voice trembling. "They say they don't want to face them." Vero froze. In all his years of conquest, he had never heard such words from Draken warriors. The human transmission returned, this time with Ethan Cole's face. His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "We've spent our history fighting against impossible odds, and we're still here. You think you know war, but you've never faced anything like us. Do you really want to find out what happens when we're cornered?" For the first time in his life, Vero Zen felt the chill of doubt. The humans weren't just defiant. They were dangerous in a way the Drekins had never encountered. General, another officer said softly. The fleet is requesting new orders. Vero stared at the display, his mind racing. The invasion could still succeed. His forces were superior in every way. But the cost would be staggering. Pull back, he ordered finally, his voice heavy. Relay my command. We leave this system at once. The officers hesitated, stunned by the unprecedented order, but none dared question him. One by one, the Draken ships began to retreat, their engines flaring as they left Earth's orbit. On the command station, a cheer erupted, but Ethan remained silent, his eyes locked on the display. He watched until the last Draken ship disappeared, then finally allowed himself to exhale. Commander? Daniels asked. Ethan turned, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. Let's make sure they don't forget what they saw. As the station settled into a quiet hum of relief, Ethan gazed out at the planet below. The battle had been won without a single shot fired, but the war, he knew, was far from over. The silence in the command station was deafening as the last Draken ship vanished from the tactical display. It was a silence not of celebration, but of exhaustion, disbelief, and the fragile relief that came from surviving the unthinkable. For a long moment, no one moved, each individual trying to grasp the magnitude of what had just happened. Commander Ethan Cole stood at the center of it all, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. Around him, the murmurs of disbelief began to swell. Officers turned to one another, exchanging nervous glances and tentative smiles. They had held the line, outmaneuvered an empire, and lived to tell the tale. Commander, Lieutenant Daniels finally said, his voice cracking through the stillness. The Draken fleet, they're gone. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the holographic display, as if waiting for some cruel twist, some last-minute reversal. When none came, he let out a slow breath. Not gone, he said. Just retreating. For now. The room erupted into a subdued applause, the kind that spoke more of shared relief than outright victory. Ethan raised a hand to quiet them. We've bought time, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Time to prepare, time to fortify, and time to ensure they never get another chance to invade. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. His words hung in the air, a sobering reminder that their survival had come at the cost of revealing their strength. The Drekins would regroup, study the encounter, and return. The galaxy's apex predators didn't simply accept defeat. In the hours that followed, Earth's leadership convened to dissect the events and chart a course forward. Ethan, now weary beyond words, stood before a global council projected on holographic screens. Presidents, generals, and scientists from every major nation listened as he outlined the aftermath. The Drekins will analyze everything we showed them, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the room. They'll adapt, learn from their mistakes, and return with strategies to counter us. What we did today was unprecedented, but it was also a gamble. If they see through the illusion, if they decide to strike again, we need to be ready. General Marcus Hayes leaned forward, his gruff voice filling the chamber. You're saying we've poked the bear, and now we have to deal with the consequences. That's exactly what I'm saying, Ethan replied. But we didn't just poke the bear, we showed that we have teeth. The question is, do we sharpen them, or do we wait for the bear to come back stronger? A ripple of agreement moved through the council. For all their differences, humanity's leaders understood one thing. The galaxy's most powerful empire had just been shown Earth's resilience. Whether it would deter them or provoke them further remained uncertain. On the Vorth, General Vero Zen sat alone in his quarters, staring at a projection of Earth. The blue-green sphere hung in the void, its tranquility belying the chaos it had unleashed upon his mind. Predators, he muttered to himself, the word bitter on his tongue. The memories of the human simulations clung to him like shadows, haunting him even in solitude. He had faced countless foes in his career, crushed entire civilizations under the heel of the Dominion, yet nothing had shaken him like this. A soft chime broke the silence, and a subordinate entered cautiously. General, Emperor Zorvok has requested a report. Vero's claws flex against the armrest of his chair. What would you have me tell him? That we fled from primitives because their history frightened us. The officer hesitated. Perhaps the truth is more complicated. Their tactics were unlike anything we've encountered. Their ability to weaponize their own past is. He trailed off, searching for the right word. Terrifying, Vero finished, his voice low. Their wars make ours look like skirmishes. They face annihilation over and over, and instead of breaking, they've grown stronger. This species is more dangerous than we ever imagined. The officer nodded but said nothing, sensing the weight of his commander's words. After a moment, Vero dismissed him with a wave. As the door closed, Vero leaned back, his mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. The humans had not defeated them in battle, but they had done something far more insidious. They had planted doubt, and doubt was a poison the Dominion had never encountered before. Back on Earth, Ethan sat in his sparsely furnished quarters aboard the command station, staring out at the vastness of space. His shoulders sagged with the weight of the day, the adrenaline that had carried him finally giving way to exhaustion. The door hissed open behind him, and General Hayes stepped in, a flask in hand. "Figured you could use this," Hayes said, setting the flask on the table. Ethan chuckled softly. "Thanks. Though I think what I need is about a week of sleep." "Won't argue with that," Hayes replied, lowering himself into the chair opposite Ethan. "Hell of a thing you pulled off today, scaring off the biggest empire in the galaxy without firing a shot." Ethan shook his head. "It wasn't just me. It was everyone, scientists, engineers, soldiers. Every person who worked on this plan." "Don't sell yourself short," Hayes said, taking a swig from the flask before sliding it across the table. "You made the call, kept us steady when the rest of us were ready to panic." Ethan took the flask but didn't drink, his gaze distant. "I keep thinking about what's next. The Drekkins won't forget this. They'll come back, and next time, they won't just expect a fight. They'll demand one." Hayes nodded. "Probably. But you said it yourself. We bought time. And maybe time's all we need to figure out how to beat them for good." Ethan finally took a drink, the burn of the liquid grounding him for a moment. "If there's one thing we've always been good at, it's fighting when the odds are stacked against us." Hayes grinned. "Damn right. And if they come back, we'll remind them why humans don't go down easy." The two men sat in companionable silence, the weight of the day slowly lifting as the stars twinkled outside the window. Across the galaxy, whispers of the encounter spread like wildfire. Other species, long subjugated by the Draken Dominion, began to take notice. The humans of Earth, a species once deemed insignificant, had stood their ground against the galaxy's mightiest empire. It was a spark, small but undeniable, that began to ignite hope in those who had forgotten what resistance felt like. For humanity, the aftermath of the encounter was not a victory to be celebrated, but a reminder of the fragility of their existence. Yet in the quiet resolve of men like Ethan Cole and Marcus Hayes, in the unity forged by shared survival, there was a beginning of something greater. They had faced the strongest empire in the galaxy and survived. Now, they would prepare for what came next. And if the Drekkins returned, they would find humanity stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever before.